Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal. We're continuing our rather dismal walk through Lyme 5 that I worked on with Mark Crutcher. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, I do recommend that you get a copy. The patterns that we saw when I was writing Lyme 5, I haven't seen any difference in how abortion's practiced in the U.S. since we published it clear back in 1996. Old habits die hard. In the section that we're covering today, which is reactions to anesthesia and other drugs, I went through and they were all deaths I've written up already, except for one case where, as of the time Lyme 5 went to press in 1996, to our knowledge, this woman actually had not died yet. Mark tended to put the women's names in quotes rather than give them pseudonyms, so I'm guessing that the woman's name actually was Joan. She was placed under general anesthesia for an abortion at Acme Reproductive Services 48 in Illinois. She wasn't monitored properly, so staff didn't promptly discover that she was having trouble breathing or provide her with adequate oxygen, and she suffered permanent brain damage. If you follow the link to the blog post about this section, I give the DuPage County Circuit Court case number if anybody would care to look for it for me, or just look at... For some reason, Mark didn't bother to put the date of death on this, but the case number 85L would indicate that her family sued in 1985. The rest of the cases were all deaths I'd already known about, and I'm just going to blow through them kind of quick so you can pay attention to some patterns. First, for some reason, Mark called Janet Blom Janie instead of Janet. She was 37 when she underwent an abortion by erstwhile criminal abortionist Sidney Knight in New Orleans on March 7th, 1974. So she died of an overdose of the drugs he administered. And he was facing criminal abortion charges at the time Knight performed this fatal abortion on Janet. But I've been unable to find even a single criminal abortion death linked to him. He managed not to kill anybody until it became legal for him to do so. Then we move ahead to another erstwhile criminal abortionist, Dr. Milan Vuch. He's considered a hero in the abortion rights movement because he was openly performing abortions in Washington, D.C. before legalization to try to challenge the law. He wanted to get arrested. He didn't get the law overturned, but he did change how they were pursued. It became contingent upon the prosecutor to prove that the abortion had not been necessary to try to preserve the life of the mother. I've been unable to find any deaths linked to his illegal abortion practice, but we have the two anesthesia deaths in his legal abortion practice. Wilma Harris, who was the first one, who died in 1974, and Jeannie English, who was 32 and died in 1980. And what's really interesting is that if you Google Milan Vuch, if you do a newspaper search for Milan Vuch, everything is written from the pro-choice perspective of what a wonderful guy he is for the most part. I did note some Washington Times and Washington Post articles that Life Dynamics used. However, I don't have access to those archives. If anybody does, please find them. Carol Wingo died of a Demerol overdose at Mercy General Hospital, which was actually not a general hospital, but an abortion hospital. And the state had tried to close Mercy for violations, but they were open on appeal when Carol went there and died. Marina Deschapelle went to a Miami abortion facility, reacted to anesthesia. They didn't have the equipment to resuscitate her. Although the person who performed the abortion was licensed and legally allowed to do it, the clinic was run by an erstwhile criminal abortionist, which might explain why he didn't bother to have emergency equipment to resuscitate her. Robin Wells, a mother of three, went to Akron Center for Reproductive Health in 1981 for an abortion. She went into cardiac arrest in the recovery room and remained in a coma until her death. Her survivors filed a suit noting that she was overdosed on anesthesia and not properly monitored. You seeing a common thread here? Darlene Wood was put under anesthesia for an abortion at Temple University Hospital. She was given nitrous oxide by face mask. After the abortion was completed, she was admitted to the respiratory intensive care unit. She suffered increasing respiratory arrest before she died on July 7th. And her estate said that the proper medical and anesthetic clearance were significant factors in her death. Regna Rajan, who performed the abortion, was successfully sued for the 1987 abortion death of Iris Velasquez. 17-year-old Lenice Dorsey underwent an abortion at a Family Planning Associates medical group facility in Orange County, California in 1986. She lapsed into a coma, was transferred to a hospital, and died later that day. The medical examiner blamed the death on cardiorespiratory arrest due to anesthesia. 13-year-old Deanna Bell suffered a similar fate at another Family Planning Associates facility in 1992. And as we get further down, because we're going in chronological order, there was another FPA death. And an interesting note, when the attorney for Deanna Bell's family contacted us at Life Dynamics, we suggested that he ask Allred in a pretrial deposition if he had ever done any kind of preventability study after an anesthesia death, and he admitted under oath that he hadn't. And that was prior to Deanna's death. So if he had done a preventability study, he might have been able to prevent Deanna's death and other deaths. They've had other deaths at FPA. There's 18 that I know of, 18 deaths at FPA. Brenda Benton survivors sued Chicago's notorious biogenetics abortion mill after her death. She was placed under general anesthesia for an abortion. She took ill afterwards, and Brenda's family said that Zikovic, the doctor, failed to determine that Brenda had an adverse reaction to drugs he'd given her and failed to detect and respond to the medical emergency. Failure to detect and respond to an emergency. Are we starting to see a pattern here? 24-year-old Patricia King went to Dean Dement in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a safe and legal abortion in 1987. When she went into cardiac arrest after she was injected with anesthetic, when the paramedics arrived at Dement's facility, which he called Statewide Clinic, they found the place so dirty they could have written their names in the dust. Patricia's sister later described the place as like a haunted house. Dement told the medics he'd injected neosynephrine and sodium bicarbonate into Patricia's heart, which is bewildering to me, but that no one had performed CPR or made any other efforts to revive her. She'd been in arrest for 20 minutes by the time the medics got there, and there was nothing they could do for her, and they had trouble even getting her out of the building and out the door. They had to tilt the gurney at a 60-degree angle just to navigate the corridors. But the abortion lobby says that there's absolutely no need to have corridors in your abortion clinic wide enough to get the patient out to an ambulance. No, you shouldn't bother with that. No. Never mind that Patricia's 3 abortion deaths that I can think of off the top of my head, where the medics had trouble getting the woman out of the building. One of them being Karnamaya Mongar, and the other one, oh my gosh, it was a recent one. I'm sorry, I can't remember. And despite being called Statewide Clinic and advertising that it was a clinic licensed by the state, it hadn't been licensed by the state since the Attorney General had declared state oversight unconstitutional in 1984. So Patricia had an abortion at a fake clinic. But according to the abortion lobby, that's the good kind of fake clinic because it doesn't give out baby clothes. Diane Watson was a 27-year-old mother of 2 when she went to her Head Surgery Center in Chicago. Rudolph, can't pronounce his last name, proceeded with the abortion in violation of a state regulation prohibiting outpatient abortions after 12 weeks. He ended up hitting a vein when injecting anesthetics. Diane went into seizures and cardiac arrest, and nobody performed CPR, leaving Diane to die. Seeing a pattern here? 23-year-old Stacy Ruckman went to Scott Barrett for a safe and legal abortion. She did not know that he was too cheap to hire somebody to do anesthesia, and instead of just having a handholder do it, he would just overdose his patients with lidocaine. They'd react to the overdose and it would knock them out. Sometimes they'd stop breathing, but They'd always been able to revive them until poor Stacy came along, and he wasn't able to revive her. Joyce Ortenzio went to Family Planning Associates Medical Group at their San Vicente Hospital. And not only did they perform an incomplete abortion, but they had given her so much amitriptyline that she suffered a delayed reaction to that, and it was a contributing factor in her death. And the last two deaths are Deborah Gray and Suzanne Logan. Those were the ones where 60 Minutes actually did a piece. And it was like, yeah, whatever. Everybody was an independent contractor. Nobody was responsible for anything. These women were obviously undergoing respiratory arrest, going cyanotic. Kyoko just chugged ahead with the abortion anyway. Deborah died fairly quickly. Suzanne Logan remained in a coma for a while, and then awoke mute, paralyzed, and with no memory of the abortion. And she died shortly after winning her lawsuit. So these are the unfortunate victims of slipshod anesthesia at the safe and legal abortion clinics that don't need any state oversight, because they would never do a bad thing. You can totally trust them.